The big question for me is why? Why?
1 minute, Derek. 1 minute.
I'll shut up for a minute.
We're just waiting for a few more delegates to come in first. It just takes a little while.
You can count on me to cock it up.
Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to 2021 Admissions Connect. We are so pleased to welcome so many of you onto our online event. I know how very busy everybody is at the moment this term, and so I hope that this online event will be really helpful to you. Without reminding everybody, as I'm sure all of you have been online with AMCIS over the last 20 months, but as always, during this presentation from Derek, if you've got any questions for him, please drop them into the Q&A and I will pose those to Derek afterwards. So, moving swiftly on to our first webinar of the day. Derek Williams has spent his whole working life in customer service. 25 years ago, he started the WOW Awards and is motivating ordinary people around the world to deliver extraordinary customer service. Derek is the chair of a major charity in the leisure sector and is also still working on the front line of customer service for one of the UK's biggest retailers, pardon me. He says, it's how I stay connected with real customers and real situations. I never want to lose the grassroots connection. Most people remember him simply as Mr. Wow. Please welcome Derek Williams. Thank you.
Hello, good morning and welcome. The big question for me is why? Why is it that there are some organisations that I go into as a customer that absolutely make my blood boil? I'm incensed. I come out full of rage and promising that I will never darken their door again because the service is so appalling. And yet there are other organisations that I go into, sometimes for a relatively insignificant purchase, that somehow just make me want to fall in love. Why is that? How can it be so different? And why is a big question that I want us to have a look at together today. For instance, why is a huge crowd of people gathered around a small butcher's shop in my hometown on a cold Saturday morning? Why would that happen? We'll come back to that in just a moment. Just to reflect on the agenda for this morning, we've got 45 minutes together. That includes Q&A. So Tori will be monitoring the chat box. Pop your questions in there. I will include in the slides that are going to be shared with you a slide of recommended readings. So a few books that I hope will inspire you and prompt some ideas. And just to mention that my definition of customer includes possibly what you might call students or pupils and parents, but it also includes internal customers and external customers, because the internal customers are every bit as important. If we don't give them good service, then they can't give great service to the external customers. Just a little word of warning though, I'm always very cautious that it's easy to come up with ideas in a creative session like this, but it's very hard to apply them when we get back to the place of work. And so periodically throughout this session, I will be displaying a little light bulb, and that's a moment for you to reflect on the topic that we've just been discussing. Make a note of any ideas that you have. Please do not suffer from this rationalizing, doing nothing when you get back into your place of work and start thinking, oh, well, those were good, but. The idea of today is to take action. So this light bulb will be popping up at least 3 times. So I'm hoping everybody will go away with at least 3 ideas that they can work on. And I have been looking at your websites. This slide is actually a compilation of 4 different schools' websites. I've been looking at what you're doing, and I can see that there is some excellent work being done. So I'm not here to criticize. My purpose is simply to spark and inspire you to go on and do even bigger and better things for the future. And as Tori mentioned, I've been running the WOW Awards for 25 years. I think it is now possibly the largest database of customer compliments in the world. And over the years, I've analysed those customer stories into what I call my 10 building blocks of awesomeness. So these are topics that I think every business could have a look at with a view to improving their customer service. And we're going to be looking at just 3 of those today. We're going to be looking at what I call bricks in the wall, systems, and communication. But let's come back to that photograph. Why were all these people gathered outside a butcher's shop on a cold Saturday morning? Well, the story started in 1952 when that butcher's shop opened, a family-run business. Always very, very popular. In fact, this was a picture taken at Christmas last year, people queuing up to get their orders. But this wasn't anything unusual. There would nearly always be a queue of perhaps 10 or 15 people on a Saturday morning wanting to collect their meat. But on the 16th of October, 2021, this crowd gathered. And the reason was they were in mourning. The butcher's was closing its doors for the last time. The last family member was taking retirement, and the people of our town would no longer be able to buy their meat products from there. This was a business that they had fallen in love with over the years. So what do we need to do in order to get customers falling in love? And that might sound a bit cheesy, but wouldn't it be great if customers said, I just love dealing with that organization, or employees said, I just love working for that organization? So let's just hold the magnifying glass up for a moment and ask you a question about your service and your organization. How important on a scale of 1 to 10 is customer service in your business? And it's a question I ask all of my customers. And often they might say, oh, it's a 9 or a 10, or sometimes they're trying to be a bit smart and they say, oh, it's an 11. And that's fine. But my follow-up question is, why is it so important? And this is usually where people start to flounder a little bit because they're not quite sure how to define the importance of service. So let's look at 3 key areas. Firstly, how competitive is your industry? Are there lots of people doing what you do, or are you the only ones that do what you do? If you're the only ones, perhaps service isn't that important. Secondly, how hard is it to differentiate what you do from what your competitors do? If I go out to buy tyres for my car, I don't know what the difference is between a Dunlop, a Pirelli, a Goodyear, a Michelin. And we wouldn't want our customers to just judge us on price now, would we? And thirdly, how much do you depend on repeat business? So I'm making a little bit of a joke here, suggesting that undertakers maybe only ever deal with the customer once. But the reality is, even an undertaker's business, they want to deal not just with the deceased, but with the members of the deceased family and his friends. They want that future business. And even an undertaker's can differentiate themselves. And this is a local firm to me, and they were the very first to offer an in-house video service, which might sound a bit strange at first, but there were very good reasons why this was a key part of their service offering. So those 3 things: how competitive is your industry? How hard is it to differentiate your product or service? And how much do you depend on regular repeat business? May dictate what sort of customer loyalty curve you have. So if you were in a monopoly type situation, you might have a curve like this red line. You don't need to do anything terribly special in terms of your customer service in order to generate those high levels of customer loyalty. But if you're in an organization with lots of competitors, difficult to differentiate, and you depend on repeat business or successive generations of business, you may have a loyalty curve much more like this white line. Now you've got to do something pretty special in order to generate those high levels of customer loyalty. And that's essentially what we're looking at today. So the first part of that wall of awesomeness is bricks in a wall. And the bricks are actually details. What are the details that you are going to put into your organization that together will build up like bricks in a wall into a structure that is solid and stable as a wall or a foundation for your organization? Let's have a look at a few examples. I go out for a meal. I go to 2 different restaurants. One of these meals absolutely delighted me. The other one left me very disappointed. What was the difference? And actually, it's such a tiny thing. The difference was simply the cutlery. The meal on the right came with cutlery. The meal on the left came without cutlery. So I then have to look around for somebody who I can ask to go and get me cutlery, and then I'd have to wait for that cutlery to arrive. And in the meantime, the meal that I've been looking forward to is starting to go cold, and I end up as a disappointed customer. Worse than that, it then starts me questioning what other things in that organization perhaps aren't too well organized. Like, are they actually cooking the food properly? And why does this happen? Like, really, is it beyond the wit of man to have cutlery on the table or cutlery that arrives with the meal? And don't tell me that you've never suffered from this, because I'm sure everybody in the world has suffered this problem repeatedly, over and over again. So it's those sort of little details. Back in the 80s, Scandinavian Airlines was in trouble. They lost $17 million in 1981, and they appointed a new chief executive, a guy called Jan Carlzon. Jan Carlzon said a couple of things in his book that really inspired me. He said, we cannot improve any one part of our business by 1,000%, but we could improve 1,000 little things by 1%. What are the 1,000 little things that you might be able to work on? He also said this, in terms of first impressions, he said coffee stains on the flip tray suggest to our customers that we don't service our engines properly. And just in case you're wondering, Scandinavian Airlines went from a $17 million loss in 1981 to a $54 million profit in 1982 by doing lots of little things. And they went from number 14 out of 17 in a league ladder for punctuality to top of the table, all in the space of 1 year. Little things. What are the little things you can be doing? So there's that light bulb. I'm going to give you a few seconds just to contemplate what little things you might be able to do in your organization. So hopefully you've got 1 or 2 ideas there that you can take away and actually start to work on when you get back to your place of work. Now let's have a little look at systems. I don't mean complex computer systems. I mean simple systems that will make all those detailed things happen consistently. Because if they don't happen consistently, the whole thing falls over. And imagine the disappointment of one of your customers if you do something once which they love, and then you don't do it the next time that you're dealing with them. So what systems would make this happen consistently? And let's just reflect on this for a moment, because basically customer decisions are based on 2 dimensions. There's outcomes. Does the outcome meet their expectation? And systems to make things happen consistently. Let's just rephrase that. Firstly, does it do exactly what it says on the tin? And then secondly, probably best expressed in a quote from Maya Angelou, people might forget what you said or what you did, but they will never forget the way that you made them feel. And that's the power of systems. So a little chart for you. Got a range of systems and how they affect the customer on the bottom axis here, ranging from dissatisfied through to delighted, and the range of outcomes on the vertical axis here, going from not met through to value added. So just imagine if I go out to buy a lawnmower and that lawnmower doesn't start, where am I on this chart? Not met, met, or value added? Probably not met. Alternatively, if I go out to buy a lawnmower and it not only assembles perfectly, it cuts a beautiful straight line on my lawn, it trims the edges, it weeds the flower bed, then probably what we've achieved is value added. That's about the outcome. But then how are we handled as a customer? If, for instance, with a mower that doesn't work, if we were to take that back to the business and the person behind the counter says, well, what you need to do is, who do you now know has got responsibility for solving that problem? Are they taking responsibility, or are they handing responsibility over to you? In which case, are you going to be dissatisfied, satisfied, or delighted with the systems? I would suggest you're probably going to be dissatisfied, in which case, as a customer, you are probably gone. The product's not met your outcome expectation, and you're dissatisfied with the systems. However, imagine a situation where they just change their system a fraction. You go in, you complain that this mower that you bought doesn't work, and they say something along the lines of, I'm so awfully sorry. We sell a lot of these mowers and we usually don't have any problem with them. Can I suggest two things? Firstly, let's take it into our workshop and check it over for you. And secondly, can I take a note of your phone number? Because once we've made certain that this mower is working properly, we will make an appointment to come and visit you and do the first cut of your lawn. And only if you are truly pleased with this mower do you buy it. If you're not totally satisfied for any reason, we give you your money back. So just think in terms of the process, are you now dissatisfied, satisfied, or delighted? Personally, I would probably be delighted. So I'm now delighted with a mower that didn't actually work. So what I'm saying is that systems can interact with outcomes, and in many ways, systems are the more important. Now, just to complete that chart, we can have a combination of any of those two factors. So you might have a group of customers that are searching for another supplier. You might have a group of customers that are at risk because if you're in a competitive situation, your competitors are targeting them with their good marketing material. You might finally have a group of customers that are what are referred to as loyal. And finally, you might have advocates. That's where we really want to get our customers. The outcome is value added and they're delighted with the service. And I would actually like to suggest we change those words. Let's change the word advocate to partners. How do we involve people in our business in such a way that they feel like they are a partner to us? And then in terms of the systems, let's change delighted to be in love, just like the people outside that little butcher's shop on that cold October morning. So let's just have a look at a couple of product developments, because product outcomes are really, really hard to work on. Just as an example, Walls Cornetto, introduced in 1959, so quite an old product now, but just recently they developed a new outcome for that product. They developed Cornetto tips. Now, I think this is absolute genius because the Cornetto is lovely, but the bit that I always love is that the bit at the bottom of the cone that's full of chocolate. So they now produce cones that are just full of chocolate, 5 of them in a box. You still buy them from the freezer section. There's no ice cream, just the chocolate. Absolutely lovely. But how long did it take to come up with that product enhancement? So my point is that product improvements can be really, really hard to do whereas systems improvements can be much, much easier to do and may act as a safety net for when things go wrong. Another little example. My wife loves Parma violets, introduced in 1946, are quite an old product now. Now, recently, Parma violets have introduced a new product. It is the Parma Violet Room Spray. It's an air freshener that smells of Parma violets. But in our house, guess where this air freshener gets used? You're right, it's the smallest room of the house. So I think that Parma violets may have actually shot themselves in the foot, because I no longer associate that smell of those rose flavored sweets with the sweets. I associate it with the small room of our house. So let's think more about the systems and a little less about the product outcome. And I think that might be key to some of our success. Now, here's a lovely example of systems. This is a pub that has an app where you can place your order and the food comes to your table. What is the big question that most people want to ask when they sit down at a table and are about to order a meal? Isn't it something around how long is it going to take to serve us? Because if you've got a meeting to go to or you're going to the theatre, wouldn't you like to know how promptly your food is going to be served? Well, this particular pub chain have added to their app a clock. So you can simply click on the clock and it will tell you exactly how long until your food is going to be ready. And the crazy thing about this is that that information has always been available. Kitchens run on clocks. They know exactly how many orders they've got in the system and how long each one's going to process. This is free information. All they had to do was share it. Richer Sounds, one of the top performing retailers for many, many years, been in the Guinness Book of Records many times for the highest retail sales per square foot, and also a Which top quality supplier for customer service. I've visited Richer Sounds and spent a day behind the scenes. They shared with me how their shops have a checklist that they go through to make sure that the shop is in good shape for the customers. It's a paper-based checklist, but it is 161 items. And every week, the newest person on the team goes round and scores the shop using that checklist. So over a period of time, they all become totally inducted into that checklist and making sure that every single part of that shop is working correctly. And the checklist includes things like a full supply of catalogues, music playing, not too loud, not too much bass. All the shop lights are working correctly. And isn't that a change from so many places we visit where things aren't working correctly? How many times have you been to a hotel room where the toilet doesn't flush or the lights don't work? A simple system would put all that to rest. So there's that light bulb. I'm just going to leave you for a few seconds to consider what systems might you be able to change in your organization. Okay, let's gently move you on. My third and final building block of awesomeness is communication. And it just staggers me how full of acronyms our world is today and full of jargon. And in case any of you are worried about any of these acronyms, please don't be. If you want to know what any of them mean, contact me afterwards. We are not going to be working with acronyms. Some years ago, I applied to my bank to become a premium customer, and they sent me a letter accompanied by 4 pages of terms and conditions. The terms and conditions were in a very small font, very hard to read. very long words, very long sentences, and absolutely switched me off. And isn't it interesting how communication or lack of communication does switch us off? How often have you, for instance, gone to a company's website and tried to find a telephone contact number that you can call, only to find that the only way that you can reach that organization is by email? And how does it leave you feeling? Does it leave you feeling pretty disappointed? I certainly felt very disappointed with my bank, the way that they were communicating with me, and especially given that I was now paying for this premium service. And the image that it conjures up in my mind is one of an organization that is trying to hold me at arm's length. It's hostile. It really doesn't want to engage with me. It just wants to take my money. Whereas really what I hoped for was more of a 5-star concierge service, perhaps the sort of service that I see in Metro Bank. And so I switched banks. And it then raises a question of what is the lifetime value of a customer to a bank? I started looking around and I spotted this. This is a change counting machine at Metro Bank. And what they do is that if a youngster goes in with their piggy bank full of change and tips it into the machine, if they can guess in advance how much exactly there is going to be in their piggy bank, they get rewarded with a lollipop. Now just think about this. A youngster that starts going into a bank with their piggy bank and getting it changed up. That's the same youngster that maybe opens an account, that takes out a student loan, that needs a loan for their first car, their first mortgage, an ISA, a pension, all of those financial products that we're going to need throughout our lifetime. What is the lifetime value of a customer? And it's huge, but you have to keep them. And if you can get them early and continue to delight them with your service, then you're going to get that customer retention and you're going to get that value. And think about also how I don't actually talk about the bank that let me down, but I do regularly talk about Metro Bank, and I take my family and my friends into Metro Bank. I talked about the bank that disappointed me with their communication. Let me share with you another piece of communication. This is my daughter, Jennifer. Jennifer applied for a job which she really, really wanted to get. And how many of us have applied for a job that we really wanted over the years, only to be disappointed not to hear anything back from that company? Well, Jennifer did hear back from that company. She got this letter, and I'm going to read it to you. It says this, it says, "Dear Jennifer, many thanks for showing your interest in joining Virgin and finding the time to come to an interview. I know how difficult that could have been for you. It can be very demoralizing to raise one's hopes before an interview and then find one is not accepted. It is not any reflection on you," and the word "any" has been underlined. "It is not any reflection on you, since only 1 in 20 people are taken on at Virgin at their first attempt. The other day, I was flying on a rival airline and I was served by a very friendly outward-going hostess. I asked her, why hadn't she applied to fly with us? I had, she said, but I got turned down at the interview. I tell this story to show that different interviews pick different people, and that you shouldn't be deterred in a year from now from trying again, either with us or another airline. Please accept the enclosed flight voucher as a small gesture with our compliments for you to use against your next Virgin flight or holiday, and the best of luck to you in the future. Kind regards, Richard." Now, isn't that just a stunning piece of communication? And contrast the difference between what my bank sent me and what Virgin sent to my daughter. I think at my bank, they went to their legal department and they said, can you give us something that will cover our arse, that will protect us from any sort of legal claim? And I think somebody at Virgin sat down and thought, how can we write a turn down letter in such a way that it doesn't destroy this person's dream of working in what we believe is a great industry? How are you communicating? Just take a few seconds to think about that. And I'm not totally done on communication yet. Let me share with you a few other little examples. Firstly, I'm sure that you've all done some psychometric profiling over the years, and psychometric profiling essentially identifies 4 types of personality traits. But a friend of mine, Nigel Risner, he likes to associate each of these personality types with animals. So people that are playful, energetic extroverts, well, he associates those with monkeys. The people that are single-minded and visionary, they're the lions. The cautious, meticulous ones are the elephants, and the caring, sharing ones are the dolphins. And this is not just about thinking of what type of animal you might be, but what type of animal are all of your customers and colleagues? And are you communicating with them in their style or in your style? So let me just give you an example. I wanted to get Michael O'Leary to come and speak at a conference for me. My colleague sent him a letter. She sent him a letter that says, "Dear Mr. O'Leary, we are seeking a successful, innovative business leader, someone not afraid of controversy who can articulate passion and new ideas to our enthusiastic members, and we thought of you." Now that is what we were thinking, but the way that the letter was written with long words, long sentences, very small font and a very full letter, full page, I don't think that was the right communication for Michael, because from what you know of Ryanair, wouldn't you describe Michael O'Leary perhaps as being a lion? And I think my colleague had written to him as though he were an elephant. And I was disappointed because Michael didn't reply. And I thought, well, even if he doesn't come to speak at our conference, let's at least get him to reply. So I sent him a different kind of letter. It said, "Good morning, Michael," big, bold font. And then in very large font, "I don't give a shite if nobody likes me. I'm not a cloud bunny. I'm not an aerosexual. I don't like aeroplanes. I never wanted to be a pilot like those other platoon of goons who populate the air industry." These are words straight out of one of Michael's own speeches. The words of a lion going back to a lion. The very next day, we got a reply. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't an email. He just scribbled simply on the bottom of my letter, "Dear Derek, very sorry, but don't do conferences. Too busy growing Ryanair like gangbusters. B wishes, Michael O'Leary." We didn't get him to speak at the conference, but we did get a response. Are we communicating with people in the style that they wish to communicate it? And that's the trick. And then what are we doing in terms of little things that are sending a message? Much like the knife and fork. This is a hotel in St Albans. I come out and the mat says Monday. Provided it is Monday, this gives me the impression that the hotel is clean. A motorcycle with a little sign on it, and not a terribly smart sign either, but it says, "Sold. My new owner has fulfilled his dreams. Please respect this and do not sit on this motorcycle." I bet every one of you could tell me what make of motorcycle that is, even if you're not a motorcycle enthusiast, because there is only one brand of motorcycle that sells dreams. My wife and I were on a cruise recently, and everybody on ship, all the crew and the passengers, had to wear masks other than when we were sat at a restaurant table. And isn't it hard to communicate with people when all you can make is eye contact and we can't see people smile. So every single member of the crew had a little badge on that said, "The smile behind the mask." And I just thought that was a wonderful touch because we could now see the smile behind the mask. And it was just a tiny piece of communication that said to me, "We care about you as a customer." On our cruise, we visited some of the Greek islands. This was a shop that everybody wanted a selfie taken in front of because of the name of the shop was #happiness. I had to wait nearly 10 minutes for the street to clear so I could get this photograph. And yet there was another shop. For some reason, I was the only person that wanted to have their photograph taken in front of this shop. I don't know why. Maybe the clue is in the name of the shop. And then sometimes communication can go disastrously wrong. I'm sure Turkish Airlines never intended this banner to be put on the downward slope of an escalator at Heathrow Airport. What a terrible faux pas that was for them. Sometimes communication can be very humorous. This is the car of the consultant who did my wife's hip replacement. I thought that one was pretty funny. But sometimes humor and honesty can go just a bit too far. I wouldn't suggest that you go as far as this little advertisement. So just a few more seconds, just reflect on what we've touched upon. We've talked about different styles of communication. We've talked about the detail of communication and how that can have an impact on your customers. Are there some ideas there that you could take away? And so we've looked at 3 key building blocks. We've looked at the details that make a difference and how those details can build up like bricks in a wall to form a really solid structure. We've talked about systems, simple systems that make things happen consistently. 161 items for a small shop, but then looking at what I needed to set up in order to be able to speak to you this morning. I have a checklist of 26 items on that, but it's that checklist that makes things happen consistently. And then communication, what we are communicating and how we are communicating it makes all the difference to our customers' experience. But I think possibly the most important part of the day is that light bulb, taking ideas away while we're thinking creatively and applying them back into our place of work. That can be tough. So please do work on those ideas, share them with me afterwards if you would like to, and if you need any help, obviously get in touch with me. But I think you have to have a vision. And I'd just like to finish with a little story. The picture here shows Roger Bannister, who in 1954 broke the world record for running the mile in under 4 minutes, a record that most people thought was physically impossible. On the 50th anniversary of that achievement, Dr. Bannister was being interviewed, and the interviewer said to him, "Does it surprise you that over this last 50 years, we've knocked another approximately 15 seconds off your world record? Something that everybody thought was impossible has now been beaten by another 15 seconds. And what Dr. Bannister said was this, he said, "No." He says, "What surprises me is that in 50 years, you've only knocked 15 seconds off my world record." He says, "I always believed it was possible for a man to run the mile in 3 minutes and 30 seconds. We need to have a vision. We need to take action. What is your vision for the future? What action are you going to take?" If you want to know more about the other building blocks, please feel free to connect with me. As I mentioned earlier, there is going to be a slide in the pack that you will receive of recommended reading. All my contact details are on screen and are going to be in the pack as well. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like to. And I'd love to share with you what your successes have been. So please do reach out. Okay, we are now going to go into Q&A, and Tori has been managing the chat box and looking at questions. What do you have for me, Tori?
Mel, could you put me back on screen, please? Thank you so much, Derek. That was really, really interesting. Loads and loads and loads of thoughts and tips and ideas. Really, really interesting. So I do have some questions. So first question is, how can I get other people around me to be as passionate about customer service as I am?
Well, sometimes that can be a tough one. It really has to start with the leadership. Otherwise, you are a little pool of customer service passion, and you know, it can feel sometimes like you're fighting an uphill struggle. But I would go along with starting to create systems that people can work to. And in fact, you might even want to start off by simply writing, what are the rules of this organization? Simple things like, if you discover a problem, who's going to take responsibility for that problem and make sure it gets sorted out? Because so often the ground rules are never properly expressed. So for instance, if you see a piece of rubbish on the ground, do you leave it for somebody else to pick it up, or do you pick it up? What are the rules? So I would start off by writing rules, and hiring the right people is obviously key. You can generally hire people that are technically competent to do the job, but can you hire people that have got a smile and can really speak to your customers with passion and enthusiasm?
That's a really great answer, and I think everybody listening in today will understand that because of the work that they're doing, working with prospective parents. It's so important to get it right and have the right personnel in the right place at the right time. Next question, which should we work on first then? Little things, systems, or communication?
Well, I think systems actually are a great place to start. It will then start you thinking about the detail. And one of the things I would suggest is that on a regular basis, perhaps weekly, you meet with your colleagues and you have a meeting that considers what's really gone well this week, what could we have done better? And that's not to beat people up, but it's to say, come on, let's share this between us. If there's something that hasn't quite worked well for us, how do we tweak the system so that that works better for the future? And just keep tweaking those systems until they work. And sometimes you will be surprised at how successful you can be really quickly. Other times you might have to work with a system over and over again, because customer reactions can often be surprising as well. You know, you might think that parents are the most caring people in the world about their son or daughter, but you know, sometimes they might not be quite as caring as you expect. So just keep tweaking the systems, and then the details will start to flow.
Yeah, and I do like the idea of sitting down and actually just suggesting what does go right and actually what hasn't gone quite so right, and nipping that in the bud as we're going along. Thank you for that. One last question. You mentioned that 62% of customers would switch suppliers because of a perceived indifference. How important is price to customers?
Well, surprisingly, price isn't nearly as important as we might think. And you know, just think about your own spending habits. Like every time you go into a supermarket, there is an array of options there that are available to you. Every product, there might be 3 or 4 different qualities, prices. You know, do you always buy the cheapest, or do you go for the one that you think is the most suitable or the best quality? That survey by Bain & Co found that only 9% of people would switch because of price. But in my experience, price is very, very secondary to service. If people are happy with the service, then they're likely to stay with you. Like the experience of my bank, I never questioned how much their charges were. And I was actually prepared to pay extra to become a premium customer and get some additional benefits. But I was so totally switched off by the service that I received that I cancelled the whole thing and went to Metro Bank.
Yep, I can see where you're coming from there, Derek. Derek, thank you so much for your time, for your experiences you've shared with us today. It's been brilliant, and I think everybody who's listened in today will take away not just one light bulb moment, but many, many light bulb moments. So Derek, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for tuning in to the first webinar. Please keep tuning in over the next 3 days. We're looking forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you, Derek. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for being part of it. Bye-bye.